Greeting. I'm Michael Quinn Patton. Let's get you warmed up with a little riff on threes before we get to the rule of three. So let's start with the classic countdown. 3, 2, 1. Okay, are you warmed up? Then let's see what comes in threes. There's the three little pigs with the straw house, wooden house, and brick house. 3 blind mice. Goldilocks and the 3 bears, different sized chairs, different bowls of porridge. Aladdin granting 3 wishes. There's triangulation, the triangle being the strongest shape in the universe. There's a story sequence, beginning, middle, and end. There's Trinidad, named for the Trinity. There's the Troika, 3 people in power, or Troika horse racing with 3 horses. And then there's the rule of 3. The rule of 3 is featured in a recent book by Saville Kushner, an exposé entitled School. And he opens that book with a discussion and presentation and analysis of the rule of 3. To appreciate the importance of the rule of 3 and what it means for how we think about the world, how we experience it, what goes on in schools, in evaluation, in systems thinking, I have to set the stage a little bit more in the works of Saville Kushner. Kushner's major evaluation book is entitled Personalizing Evaluation, published in 2000. It's about the evaluator's responsibility to take seriously and communicate authentically the perspectives of those we, evaluators, encounter during our evaluation inquiries. In the book, we learn about programs through the people in those programs, rather than learning about the people through the programs. This is an important and major revision of perspective, to see that people have lives of which a program is a part, rather than treating programs as the most important thing in people's lives. Personalizing evaluation is a people-centered approach to evaluation. He writes, notwithstanding our urgency to understand how people fit into our programs and interventions, the true imperative is to understand how our interventions fit into the lives of people. This is the core democratic task of any project, program, or policy evaluation, and it remains as a significant methodological and writing challenge. And it remains so to this day. In 2016, he published Evaluative Research Methods, subtitled Managing the Complexities of Judgment in the Field. He wrote in that volume, what I will try to do now is to induct you into a way of thinking about evaluation and evaluative research, in fact, a way of thinking about its current demise. Throughout his writings, he's very focused on the importance of thinking, on our processes of rendering judgment, whose values come into play, how those values come into play, how data are used, but not mechanically or mechanistically, but thinking in a deep and meaningful way. He writes, where we ask evaluation to rule on the worthwhileness of a program, we ask far too much for its substance, its interactions, what is made of it, and what is made out of it are far too complex to be summed up. That's a radical perspective in contrast to the dominant message in evaluation of rendering overall summative judgments. He writes, we often talk about striking a balance between evaluation for accountability and evaluation for learning. This is hopelessly simplistic. Agencies acting on behalf of the political community should be accountable for their learning, and they should learn from their accountabilities. There is no dichotomy. And so a consistent frame for Saville Kushner's work is to question orthodoxy, question traditional ways of thinking, question dominant paradigms, and offer alternative ways of thinking. and acting. He writes, each new evaluation requires methodological thinking in the same sense that a fine artisan crafts a unique and customized product based on a creative, contextually sensitive thought process. Neither the creative artisan nor the thinking evaluator is engaged in factory assembly work. Kushner's writings are filled throughout with provocative, challenging statements, questioning the status quo, and providing deep insights based upon his experience, reflections, and thoughtful inquiry. Another example, what I believe in, he writes, standards are important, but the only meaningful standards are locally derived and specific to circumstance. This stands in stark contrast to the widespread practice of major bureaucracies, international agencies, imposing top-down uniform standards that ignore local specific circumstances and situations. But in that book, he decided it would be his last evaluation book. He was packing up his ideas, methods, critiques, hopes, and leaving the field of evaluation. Evaluative research methods book would be his last. He said, my swan song from the field of evaluation. Well, perhaps not a swan song. I kid Saville, but in the words of the great New York Yankees manager Yogi Berra, it ain't over till it's over. Also emphasized by Lenny Kravitz, it ain't over till it's over. So what's not over? What's not over is Saville Kushner writing exquisitely and importantly about how the world works. In this case, about how schools work, subtitled An Exposé. And in this work, he brings his knowledge, his personal experience from his own schooling, as well as years of research and evaluation around schooling, to this subject. He says to me, this book is the only thing I've written that I truly like. It's written mostly for parents and student teachers. But from my perspective, this is another book for evaluators, which is why I'm doing this review. This is a book for policymakers and changemakers and evaluators. That's where the rule of three comes in, because it is a powerful illustration of an insight that has widespread implications for evaluative thinking and practice. Before getting to the rule of three, it's helpful to take a look at another approach that he introduces that is central to evaluation, and that is comparative analysis. Evaluation is inherently comparative, comparing a baseline to a result, the beginning of a program to the end of a program, comparing different kinds of programs, comparing programs over time, comparing paradigms. He opens the book with a discussion of what he calls the universal classroom, which is a beautiful example of comparative analysis. The universal classroom defies cultural diversity. They are all the same world over. Petrified in a stone-clad model of industrial processing, they have the same grammar. He compares that with the notion that classrooms are unique and idiosyncratic, unrecognizable one from the other. Both are true at the same time and at all times. So classrooms are both universally the same and idiosyncratic at the same time. Think about that. He goes on to say, the classroom is universal and unique, replicable yet eccentric. It both suffocates and breeds, trembled with uncertainties, and stiffens with grinding predictability. The classroom is emotionally dense and intimate, but at once aloof and automated. This is a uniquely complicated environment, the classroom. If you were to choose a career as an educational researcher, as I did, it would be for this reason, or else you may have made a mistake. The classroom is by a country mile the most complex social space modern and medieval societies dreamed up. Examination of the classroom as a socially complex space, as both universal and unique in every aspect, reveals his passion for that work, the importance of education, his insights into the nature of schools, and in the book he discusses at length what he has learned about and how he has studied classrooms and the students in those classrooms and the teachers and the dynamics of classrooms and schools. Which brings us then to the rule of three. The rule of three is based upon a story he tells in the book about a colleague who is a curriculum developer and would go to classrooms and ask teachers for help in testing out new curriculum materials. And this curriculum developer would always ask for a range of students, saying, I'd like to test out these materials on 4 students. And the teacher would inevitably respond, sure, but who's the 4th? Saville writes, the common response meant that the teacher already had in mind for students to test new materials a clever kid, a middling one, and a not so clever kid. But who's the 4th? In other words, the rule of three is that we think in terms of a distribution of high, medium, and low. What Saville calls a, quote, insidious form of prejudice that runs through our society, and so inevitably through schools, close quote. Saville Kushner attributes this way of thinking to, quote, the defeatist thinking of Plato, close quote, and says, quote, it's almost certainly woven into your own mind and personality, as it is in mine, the clever, middling, stupid thinking of unthinking pedagogue. Plato's ideal society consisted of gold, silver, and bronze people. Each achieved virtue by playing their role well. You could be a good leader or a good follower. You accomplished high intellectual tasks suited to your capabilities, or you accomplished manual or medial tasks especially suited to your natural, more limited talents. This notion that we rank people, rate them, look at them through this rule of three, above average, average, and below average, is a fundamental to the rule of three. This insidious way of thinking, Saville suggests, not just affects schooling, but affects our entire way of looking at programs, at the ways in which we judge all kinds of things, and that it has an insidious effect upon how we make sense of things. The story of the 3 little pigs manifests and exemplifies the rule of three: the weak, poorly constructed house, the medium house, and the strong house. Goldilocks and the 3 bears manifest the rule of three: the big chair, the medium-sized chair, the little chair, the big bowl of porridge, the medium bowl of porridge, the little bowl of porridge. The normal distribution and its 3 standard deviations manifest the rule of three. When you start looking, you'll see it all kinds of places. The rule of three is widespread. His experience in this rule of three was being put into the below average stream in school, what was called the remove stream. The kids that weren't going to make it for college, weren't likely even to make it in technical school, but just had to be dealt with at the lowest level, move them through, and with very low expectations. It is a testament to his own grit and resolve that he persevered despite that categorization, and in higher education continue to be challenged by dealing with the way in which education was organized and presented, but found ways to learn, to contribute, and despite being placed in the below average remove stream, achieved the highest levels of educational accomplishment possible, including writing these kinds of books that give us an insight into the nature of school systems around the world. So we have here the comparison between the average classroom, which is the universal classroom, and what he presents in great depth in the book as the excellent, child-centered, thought-provoking classroom. That's the ideal that he lays out. The pole star, he says, should be educational equity. And he defines this as equality means all children receive a pair of shoes. Equity means all children receive a pair of shoes that fit. Having documented the inadequacies of the universal classroom in the first part of the book, he turns to a vision of success, of excellence for schools. Education, he says, as induction into knowledge, is successful to the extent that it makes the behavioral outcomes of the students unpredictable, close quote, citing Stenhouse. This is worth pondering and thinking about the implications of, because it really is a way of emphasizing a schooling that supports the individuality, the learning, the thinking, the creativity, the potential of each student. He asks, how do you see classrooms? What do you remember of your classrooms? Do you see them as places of teaching and learning? And he invites us to think again. Think again and again and again and again. Because that is Saville Kushner's passion, is getting people to think. And that's why this is a book not just for teachers and parents and students, but for evaluators and policymakers and changemakers and anyone willing to engage in reflective practice to think. Think again and again and again and again. And his notion of success brought forth to me the slang term catawample, which is defined as to travel purposely toward an as yet unknown destination. Now, as an American, I can't quite be sure of what this slang term fully means, but it certainly resonates with me as representing what Saville Kushner thinks of as the outcome of education, that children come out, students come out prepared to travel purposely toward an as yet unknown destination. And that certainly was his experience and continues, I think, to be his experience. I close then with a quote from American poet Walt Whitman, who said, "Re-examine all you have been told, at school or church or in any book. Dismiss what insults your own soul, and your very flesh shall be a great poem." Saville Kushner's book itself is a great poem, looking at the way things are, looking at the way things could be for schooling, and exposing to us the insidious nature of thought patterns that we've been indoctrinated in, including prominently the rule of three.